You're looking at the end of a Douglas fir log that maybe is 400 years old. Now that's a fair piece of time. And it begs the question, do they make them like they used to? Well, yes, they do, but it takes 400 years. There are other questions. How much better is tight grain, Douglas fir, than the coarser grain? It grew about 40 years to there and about 300 years out to here. Is this wood better than that wood? What should I use this kind of material for compared to this kind of material? Because in the box stores, you're going to get almost exclusively this kind of material. And in order to get this kind of tight grain stuff, you're going to have to pay a premium. Is it better? Is it stronger? Is it sustainable? Is it more rot resistant? When we get to the end of this video, you're going to know a lot more about how much should I spend in order to get the characteristics that come out of a tree like this. Now here in just a minute, you're going to watch me cut a piece off this log and then do a strength test to compare old growth to second growth Douglas fir. But right now, what I want to do is have you join me on a trip to the forest. My friend Cy Swan has got a ranch with timber that he's been managing along with his cattle for a long time. So when people talk about how much growth you're getting on a patch of timber, with 10% being kind of the high end, right? That's about all the Douglas fir gain you're going to get, maybe?
You can beat that, but not usually. And yeah, that's good. That's a good growth, really.
And if you think about that, it's compound interest. You get 10%, and then the next year you get 10% on that 10% growth, and 10% on 10% bigger, and 10% on 10% bigger, and 10 years later, you know, the magic of compounding interest, you got some wood,
yeah,
and therefore some money. And look at the length on these. I mean, these things are, what are those, 130 feet up to the top, to the crowns, maybe?
They're awful tall.
Yeah, and they're straight. They're almost poles.
And when the log buyer comes, he salivates.
Yeah, he would love these. So here's an example. This tree, at some point, got a log drug along the side of it, probably, and skinned off the bark. And it's healed back. There's no rot. There's no defect. It's just so healthy in here. This begins to have, I think, what would be termed by any environmentalist, old growth characteristic. Now, they're fussy about whether or not men have touched a stand before they can designate it as having old growth characteristic. That's baloney. These are strong, straight, healthy Douglas fir trees on a sustainable spacing with sword ferns on the ground and thimbleberries on the ground, and there's a little cedar tree that's volunteering over there, so it's not monoculture.
I cut all the madrone and yew-wood out of here.
Hack out the hardwood junk.
Well, I cut it for firewood.
Yeah. So Cy's estimating that these trees in this little patch right here are maybe 80 years old. 80 years. Look at the amount of wood in that tree in 80 years. Look at the beautiful situation it's creating. We're going to go up and look at a stand that's much younger because Cy supervised or planted or paid for the planting of a stand just up the draw, and he knows essentially, with pretty good degree of certainty, that they were planted in 1978. Let's see what those trees look like. So there's no ambiguity about the fact that this is second growth. This is not old growth characteristic. This is thick as hair on a dog's back. And Cy was personally responsible either by digging the hole and putting the seedling in the ground or paying for it to be done. In a 2-year period of time, you planted how many trees here?
160,000.
160,000 trees Cy planted, or the crews that he hired planted, 48 years ago. So here's what you get after 48 years after it being planted, but they didn't plant them anywhere near this close. This has been naturally seeding in between, in the spaces left between the trees that were planted by hand.
Okay, one thing you need to know, there's 80 acres of old growth right there.
Right there. No
and that's
kidding.
dumping.
Yeah,
that
the old
seed.
growth are blowing seeds down in
Right.
here. But these are slinging seeds like crazy.
Yeah.
You know, there's just seeds coming from everywhere. And we're northeast aspect again.
Yep.
Ideal Douglas fir ground. Look at this tree. Now this tree may have been here when they planted, but it wasn't near this size.
I don't think so.
Okay, this is probably 48 years old. But it's got a little more space. It's not competing quite as hard as some of those. In fact, that's interesting.
It's by the road.
It's by the road, it's got opening, it's getting more sun, and it's doing everything it can to kill every other tree around it, or at least get all of the light and all of the nourishment. I had a friend, now dead, whose name was Tom Ketwike, and he spent his entire working life as a forester for the Bureau of Land Management. And let me tell you, he really knew our Pacific Northwest forests. I remember a conversation where he told me of a tree that he had inspected and used an increment borer to determine how old it was. I think he told me it was 48 inches in diameter where he drilled it, and it turned out to be 50 years old. Think of that. And then he said, Scott, it almost doesn't matter what we do. This country is going to grow trees. Now, he was a man who knew. And so, with keeping that in mind, that a 4-foot diameter tree sprang into existence in 50 years, it's an anomaly, but still, it illustrates the confusion that swirls around the terms old growth and second growth. These two broad general categories are usually thought of as designating first, size. Big trees are usually old growth, right? Often more than 100 or 150 years old. And second growth, or reprod, as it's called around here, is usually smaller, anywhere from the seedlings that are planted every year by the gazillions to the smaller merchantable trees that, they start around 25 years old now. They can be cut for pulp. Up through 30 to 40 years, they can get lumber and chips. And right on up to the larger trees in 100 or 130 years that, as I noted in extreme cases, could be as big as 4 feet thick. Then there is the characteristic of the forest that the trees create as they grow. Second growth is dense. They're trees packed close together with branches right down to the ground and touching each other almost all the way up. Those trees are in a cutthroat race straight up. They're competing for sunlight. They're growing up to 10% per year. And the winners begin to drop off their lower branches to concentrate their energy in the top, where they're getting the sunshine, until they break out, get away from the pack, into the sky, and flourish straight and tall. The losers, on the other hand, get shaded out. They gradually slow up. They gradually begin to shrink. More wood dies than grows, and eventually the tree itself is dead and falls to the ground to rot away. This is a 10-foot log about 42 inches in diameter that came out of the very middle of a seed tree. A seed tree was a big, healthy tree that was left scattered out, lots of them in the middle of a clear cut, when the site was logged, to reseed the logged over ground. That's the way it used to be done. This was done maybe 40 or 50 years ago, perhaps. And you know what? It worked, because the ground up there was covered with second growth timber. Now, after the 4 decades that passed, it blew down onto a roadway and really shattered on impact. It blew up. My friend Bruce bought a firewood permit from the Bureau of Land Management to salvage the wood in this old boy, and when he saw how nice and big it was, he called me up. And so, game on. Old growth versus second growth also speaks to the quality of the wood fiber itself. And it's a function of how fast or slowly the tree was growing. The growth rings range from, maximum 1 or 2 inches, 1 or 2 rings per inch, he said, on the fastest growing reprod to, anywhere from 10 to 50 per inch on the older, suppressed, or in this case, 300 or 400 year old specimens. Now, as far as the distance between the growth rings, these rings exist because of the difference between the wood fiber that grows early in the year, spring and early summer, and the wood fiber that grows late in the year, late summer and into the fall. Early growth wood is lighter in color, with thinner cell walls that are less dense and so not as strong. It also tends to be thicker on the tree. The early growth is usually more volume. The late growth is darker in color, less volume. It's brownish, like I said, in color, and the cell walls are thicker and more dense, and so stronger. The amount of fiber that the tree puts on each year is directly related to how much light, how much water, and how much nutrition the tree gets throughout the growing season. So, some growth rings are wider and some are narrower. An unmistakable sign of an old Douglas fir tree is the thickness of the bark.
It can be up to, 4 or 5 or 6 inches thick at the base on the really old ones. And it's almost fireproof. A big old tree doesn't even know that the woods are on fire sometime. And I was concerned enough about the water and the dirt inside this thick bark that I bypassed the saw stop safety, which gives me yet another chance to point out how much I like this table saw. So after Bruce called me to talk about the big blowdown that he found, we jumped in the car and we drove out Reston Road into the Coast Range to get a look. And the drive itself was a textbook tour of the sustainability of Pacific Northwest timberlands. We drove through fresh clear cuts. We drove through newly planted hillsides. We drove through 10-year-old stands where the trees were thicker than hair on a dog's back, racing up to the sunlight. And then we drove through progressively older stands up to maybe, 50-year-old gun barrels standing there, 24-inch diameter breast high and 120 feet tall. Beautiful things. All of this alternated with sections of stately old-growth forest. Beautiful, diverse, and stagnant in terms of how much wood fiber was being produced annually. The drive made me proud of the progress we've made in forest management over the last 100 years. And let me tell you that anyone who thinks that there are no trees left in Oregon has never road hunted in Oregon.
All right, we've been struggling to figure out how to do this because we are not Project Farm around here. Man, you guys at Project Farm know how to do this sort of thing, but all we're doing is comparing second growth fir to old growth. So we're going to use the weak axis we want to break, and we're going to use a bucket full of pea gravel. Plenty heavy to break a stick that size. All right, let's hit pause and see just how far that thing is bending. Oh yeah, if I had a garage head that looked like that, I'd be moving my car out, I can tell you that. That, my friends, is an unhappy little stick. There it goes, there it goes. Okay, that thing took a load. All right, old growth, limber, strong. Let's see how that second growth does. Let's mark the rock, although the measurement is all the rock in the bucket. All right, let's do this. All right, second growth. Got it. Oh, yes, sir. There it went. All right, so let me own this. If I didn't mention it already, that old growth felt wetter in the hand. It felt limber. It felt like you could make a bow out of it. And I would say that the way it yielded substantiated that. But look at this. Maybe that's an oversimplification. It parted across essentially 1 year's growth. I mean, the break pulled apart right there, encountered that growth ring, went diagonally, daylighted out there. On this side, it parted and had to work its way across all of those growth rings. A big difference in the way that broke. So, as I boil this down, here's what we all should think of. Let's not waste this. Let's use it with gratitude. Sometimes you need firewood, and so you use fire. That's not wasting it. But when you get a chance to get your hands on a beautiful piece of wood of any species, even if it's a cast-off, even if it's some piece that someone else doesn't have the imagination to use to make something of beauty and utility, maybe you can. And in general, let's use what we receive with gratitude, and let's do something. Let's do something with the materials that are available to us that is beautiful and useful and makes the situation better for somebody. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work. So this is probably pretty close to exactly similar, this tree, to the chunk that I cut that second growth slab out of that we're going to test in the shop. So we're going to go in there and try to answer the question somehow about structurally, which is better, old growth, second growth, and how much better does better even mean?
You can't answer that question. This little tree might have really tight growth rings, and I can show you some trees this size.
Yeah, that have been suppressed.
That are beautiful wood.
Yeah.
And tight grain.
Yeah.
And I can show you some trees this size that have grown out in the open that are trash.
Yeah, true.
So it's not a
different trees, like
yes,
different people. Yeah.
Yes.
Different trees are like people. But let's assume this tree is 50 years old. It's 18 inches in diameter.
You see, that's not a very big tree for a 50-year-old fir tree.
No, it's not. They get bigger in 50 years.
You bet your ass.
They get big in 50 years. Yeah.
So this will be Roseburg lumber is growing trees like this in 50 years.
So this is pretty tight grain second growth.
Yep, it is.
It would make good veneer.
It does make good veneer.
Yeah.
They peel them down to where they're damn near matchsticks now.
That's right. So when I was sawing those cross arms, the spec was at least 8 growth rings per inch. And that little tree would make 8 growth rings per inch all day.
I think so.
Yeah.